This is Capital Games Movie Club. I am the Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
Zero, how you doing this week?
A little bit of an exhausting start to the week, but it'll be fine.
Yeah, I know how those weeks used to be. Man, I don't envy you on that. All right, so, Zero, it is Pride Month, and we're going to take the whole week to watch some LGBTQ films. And we decided last week we're going to watch the 1999 camp comedy, But I'm a Cheerleader, starring Natasha Lyonne, Clea DuVall, Michelle Williams, and RuPaul and Cathy Moriarty, directed by Jamie Babbit. I heard of this movie back when it released in theaters in 99. The thing that I remember is that the critics hated this movie. They were like, this movie is awful. I'm looking at the Metacritic right now. The score is 39 out of 100. And for the critics to actually put it in that score, it really means that the majority of them just did not like the movie at all. When did you first hear about this movie?
I heard about it a few weeks ago because one of the listeners of the show, they had sent me kind of a list of uplifting LGBTQ movies to consider because, I mean, I said it before when we were going to prepare for a Pride Month movie selection. I was just like, geez, it's going to be hard because a lot of the LGBTQ movies are just, they're very serious. But they can be kind of depressing and sobering too. So it was just like I don't mind heavy things, but sometimes it can just really just be a bit too much and too heavy on the mind. And I was just like, I want something fun, maybe even comical. Definitely want something more on the uplifting side. And then just kind of saw this on the list, and when I kind of read through the general themes of it, I was like, okay, yeah, I think this is one I'd be interested in seeing because one of the descriptors for it was edgy humor. I was just like, sign me up.
Yeah, I've been watching LGBTQ films since the 90s. The 90s had something called, I think it's called the New Queer Wave, or New Queer Cinema, where a lot of films from the independent circuit started showcasing a lot of gay and lesbian films. The first one I remember watching was Love, Valor, Compassion in 96, which was actually a pretty good movie. That movie is hard to come by. And I've wanted to watch it again, but I haven't been able to. But I've always been interested in these types of films, even though I'm straight, because the drama that is inherent in those films seems to be more raw and authentic than in most other dramas. There's a certain feeling and, for a lack of better word, taste that these types of movies have that are incredibly unique, that just I gravitated to when I was younger, and I still gravitate to this day. So I heard about this movie again in like 99. But when I saw that it got slammed, I was like, oh, so I guess it's not worth the time to watch. But as the years have come by, it's actually become a cult hit. And it's actually been mostly for the LGBTQ crowd, where they would say, no, this is actually a pretty damn good movie. So when this was suggested, I was always on the fence watching it. But now that we got the chance here to see it, it was a good chance to check it out. And you want to just get to the review?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's get to the review of But I'm a Cheerleader, starring Natasha Lyonne, Clea DuVall, Michelle Williams, and RuPaul Charles, directed by Jamie Babbit. I want to let you guys know we are probably doing minor spoilers. We're not going to do a spoiler section, so let's just get that out of the way. The first thing that I think surprised me a little bit in this film is they call this an edgy comedy. And the 90s was filled with edgy comedies. Well, we're talking about There's Something About Mary. We're talking about American Pie. I didn't think this was that edgy. I think the edginess was really because it was about lesbians and gays. Which, at that point, when I started picking up on that, I was like, oh, okay, this is not really that edgy at all. So at first I was kind of disappointed. But even saying that, this film is pretty funny. And I actually enjoyed watching this film. The film seems to have, I would say, two different feels to it, which is the comedy part, which is the first half, and then the second part, it gets a little more serious and a little more direct with what's going on in the film. It's one of these films where I've watched it and I have in the back of my head, how could critics not like this movie? The feeling I got from it was, one, the camp, and two, I'd hate to say it, but I guess the themes were over the critics' heads at the time, because there was very few, if any, gay or lesbian critics at the time. So I bet somebody can count one or two for me, and they might be right. But I was just shocked that I was watching this movie and actually really enjoying it and really enjoying all parts of it, and just being stunned that this was lambasted around in the 90s.
Much like you, as I was watching the film, I was just like, I don't think it's really that edgy, but I think I'm inclined to agree with you. It was likely that during 1999, anything that was involving lesbian or gay culture was probably seen as like edgy sort of topics. So I was just like, all right, well, it's not as edgy as the theme analysis seemed, but just not a big deal. I mean, I get it. I'm many years removed from when it actually came out, so. Overall, I mean, I also felt that, it's, in the beginning, it starts off pretty heavy on the comedy end, and then right towards, I want to say, the last third of the film, that's when things start to get, like, serious, but not, like, overtly serious.
Like rom-com serious.
Yeah, exactly. But overall, I mean, it felt like a fun film overall, and much like you mentioned, it is a bit weird that critics just absolutely reviled it and everything back when it came out. I didn't really look at any critic impressions as to avoid coloring how I would see this film. So I looked at it afterwards. I was like, wow, really? People didn't. I thought it was actually kind of a funny film, maybe a little bit clever in some places, but I didn't think it was absolutely horrible or anything.
I guess with time being removed and us being older is coloring our opinions a little bit, because sometimes films that were lambasted or given poor reviews or being given a poor reception when they came out end up becoming beloved as time goes by with fresher eyes. I don't think that's the case with this movie. I think, honestly, the humor might have been either over people's heads, or I even hate to say it a little bit in this, but it could be that critics around that time watched this and went, okay, whatever. Like, it's campy, it's kind of silly, it looks cheap, and I'm not laughing because I don't quite get the jokes, so it's a bad movie. I think I usually, like, when people say we need more of X type of person than this and more of X type of person than that, and go, do we? I mean, don't we need, like, diverse opinions on this or diverse thought processes? That's what I would think. But in this case, I really think the critics got it wrong, because there weren't people entrenched in that group that could see I guess the humor in it. With gay and lesbian culture now more accepted than it was in the 90s now, I can get certain aspects of the movie, but even the things I don't feel like I quite get, I still think it was pretty funny in this movie, and also charming. It was actually a very sweet film. I really think the edginess, and look, it was said on here from the MPAA, it's rated R for strong language and sexual content involving teens. When you see sexual content, I mean, they're talking about sex, sure, but it's not gratuitous. That was another thing that I was a little bit worried about in this. Not that I can't handle gratuitous talking about sex or sex scenes in itself, but when it goes overboard is when I'm like, do I really want to watch that? But this movie doesn't really do that either, which is a little strange, because it's about people exploring their sexualities or being forced to subvert their explored sexuality. So I was kind of expecting it to be... Let me tell you what I thought the movie was going to be, okay? I thought the movie was going to be this girl has to go to a conversion camp to, pray the gay away. And it's a screwball comedy where the teachers are so inept, they accidentally get them to be more and more aroused and more accepting of their sexualities. and I was expecting like the third act of the movie being, this is gonna sound terrible, where everything goes so crazy. There's like a big makeout / orgy scene that is somewhat hilarious and somewhat sexual, to where everyone was like, oh man, we failed this conversion, but we finally accept who we were. That's kind of what I was expecting in this, but it didn't go that way. And I was actually pleasantly surprised it didn't go.
I almost kind of got a vibe on some of the jokes and skits and stuff like that. I was just like, ooh, is this gonna go like scary movie, silly slapstick kind of weird, or, and then it'd be like, nope, you know, not, they didn't go too crazy, okay. Because sometimes I think when movies kind of really get a bit hammy on the humor, sometimes it almost kind of buries the plot, in my opinion. So it was kind of a nice surprise for me. I was like, oh, cool, you know, they didn't go completely bonkers with like just tuning up the humor to like absolutely slapstick values or anything.
Right, but they do go a little slapsticky in the humor in this movie, but it's done in a way that I could see some people watching this and saying they're kind of making fun of the kids in this, but I don't really see it that way. It's making fun of the fact that they're in the situation, I think, in this. But I don't think the film turns around and says, like, oh, look at these goofballs. Isn't it funny that they're in this situation, or isn't it funny that they have to act this way? I think it definitely makes fun of the conversion teachers, which are the two played by Cathy Moriarty and RuPaul, who I gotta say, watching RuPaul first in the movie was legitimately funny, but then because she wasn't in the movie that much, it was like I was expecting a little more from RuPaul, but I think I'm fine with what was shown in this. But I came up surprised because I was expecting a gross out comedy to a certain extent that is very sexual, and we got a movie that is more tender and more charming than it is when it comes to what it's showing than it really is anything else. Like I thought it was actually sweet, which I was not expecting, and I think it's better for it in this.
It was a little bit jarring to see RuPaul play a straight character. I was just like, this is the wildest juxtaposition I've ever seen.
Yeah. Oh God. And then the looks she has, or RuPaul has, when looking at Rock. It's like, oh God.
I was just like, looks like Mike is failing at his job to be the straight coach. Oh my God.
Yeah. And here's the thing about this movie too. Like the thing that this movie does so right is it does camp in a right way to be entertaining. But I will say this, I usually don't like camp movies because it just seems like with most movies, it's an excuse to be very bad at making films. I was like, oh, we're camp, so it's gonna look garish and it's gonna look ugly and it's gonna look it's gonna be pretty stupid, but it's camp. And a lot of camp movies fall under that line, and I just don't respond to it this well. I think the campiness of the movie is a big strength in this because it doesn't take itself too seriously. It doesn't take the movie seriously, but it takes the subject seriously. So it knows it's being a little silly, but it's not insulting your intelligence while doing so. And I really responded very well to that. I thought it was actually really well done, the humor in this.
I can definitely agree with how you felt about it. Because, yeah, I mean, going into this movie, I thought it was just going to be, you know, really hammy and really campy with some of the jokes and stuff like that. And I was just like, well, yeah, I guess it's not as edgy as I thought it'll be, but maybe they're going to go in the camp direction and maybe it's going to be really hammy about it. But, God, if they ham it up too much, then this might not be as funny as I was hoping it for. And it manages to strike a very good balance with it because just they didn't overly get hammy with the humor and everything. So I was just like, oh wow, you know, that's kind of cool, you know, just they didn't get excessively crazy with it. And I think I appreciate the movie a little bit more because of that. So it was one of those things I was just like, wow, you know, just I'm actually kind of glad that, you know, just It kept the movie a balanced stance and everything, because that's when I really start to get annoyed with campy movies, when they get overly hammy and it kind of ends up being sort of a crutch for the movie, lacking on substance. That's when I start to really dislike camp, when I'm just like, oh, okay, you're just using camp as a crutch because the movie is clearly lacking plot, world development, or something to give it a little bit more substance. Okay, I'm gonna start tuning out because I'm starting to get bored with how much you're relying on camp as a crutch. But this movie does not use camp in that sort of a way. It uses it to help sort of make moments a bit humorous, maybe a bit silly, but it definitely does not rely on it as a crutch. And I think I appreciate the movie a bit more because of that.
For some films, when they do camp, the right way to do it, I think, is to wink and nod and say, yeah, we know, don't worry, we know, and then go on with the plot. A lot of bad camp likes to point out with neon signs going, hey, look at me! And it really becomes annoying and really isn't charming at all. And I think that's what this film does really well, is that even though the characters are pretty one-note and pretty one-dimensional, with maybe the exception of Megan and Graham in this movie, which are played by Natasha Lyonne and Clea DuVall, they are charming enough and have enough substance to them that it's still, even though they're played for humor, it's not in a mean way for like any character in this, including surprisingly the villains in this movie. Like, for the most part, I would say Cathy Moriarty's character, Mary Brown, is clearly a villain. And I think Graham's parents are clearly just like scumbags. So that I get. But for the most part, it actually is very smartly written in this. And it's something that we discussed this before we got on. It's something that I miss in a lot of entertainment when dealing with LGBTQ people and LGBTQ matters. Because in the 90s and the 2000s, when these films would come out, authenticity was the most important thing. This is true, this is real, and this is how we feel, is how I would really judge it. And you would believe it in these types of movies. And on the one hand, I'm glad that LGBTQ people are getting more popular and getting more accepted. But on the other hand, it just seems like movies and TV shows these days that explore these themes are much less authentic. They seem to go towards the 80s, 90s romantic comedy route, which is really not a good idea in this. It's better for them to just be themselves than to try and be what everyone else has thought was comfortable in like the past 50 years. What made their media so different and special and engaging is those different things that they're not embracing. I think.
To your point of authenticity, I really feel that this had a lot of heart and authenticity in it, even if it is sort of highly satirizing the set dressing, which in real life is actually kind of depressing. I mean, a gay conversion camp is a pretty sad place from some of the horror stories that came out in the media back in the early 2000s and everything.
Yeah.
But just the way that the characters just feel authentic and true to themselves, and the writing, I think, is just fantastic. And it just made the sweet moment towards the end just so much more worth it, in my opinion.
Let's get into some of the things I did not like, or that I had issues with. I did have an issue with the ending. I thought it was probably going to be something a little different, but it kind of went in Say Anything, standard rom-com territory, which on the one hand is fine. Like, I don't hate it. On the other hand, with the way that the film was being in this and was being a little different and unique, I thought they would have a different ending to this as well. Like, I didn't want like a sad ending where, I won't spoil it, but I didn't want a sad ending. But I wanted something a little more thoughtful. But I can't really say that I am disappointed in it. I just think it could have been a little bit better. The film also slowed down at certain aspects, but I think it slowed down in transition from being a screwball comedy to being a little more serious. Is my issues with that. So, all excusable. I'm fine with the way the film is. I just expected a little more from the ending. Anything that you had issues with for the movie?
Subversion part of the film towards the middle, where just a event happens where they're given like kind of a more balanced perspective on the characters being true to themselves. It was neat, but they didn't explore it very much, and it was kind of one of those things that was like, this would have been interesting to see the characters sort of explore things a little more, but I can't blame the direction of the film too much because it just seemed like it was developed on a little bit of a limited budget, so maybe they just didn't have time to expound on that particular part too much.
Yeah, the film is 90 minutes, and on the one hand, if you have a tight story that works, and this movie works, keep it at that length. On the other hand, I do have to agree with you. I wish there was a little more depth to the characters, specifically the two main characters, or really the one main character, because Graham knew what she was and tried to hide it for everybody else, even though, in my interpretation is, she knew who she was never going to change, but she wanted to get out of this in order to get what she thinks she deserves or she should have, and then go live her life. Whereas I think with Megan, Natasha Lyonne's character, she was exploring those situations and those feelings. And yeah, I think I agree with you. I wish there was a little more depth on Megan's end to make it to give her a little more depth to her character, to let her explore those things. The little bit of pushback I would have on that is that for a movie so limited on its runtime, I think it would have been a little counterproductive, because then you would have to add another 20 minutes. And I think the tightrope they do in this, where they go from ridiculous comedy to somewhat serious drama, I think it would have offset the equilibrium a little bit. My opinion on that. You might not feel the same way, but I think that might be the reason why they didn't go that route in this movie specifically. I think that they just wanted to keep it tight and snappy, get the laughs in, get the point across, and then boom, it's over. It's entertaining, it's light, it's fluffy. We don't want to get too serious and bogged down in everything. That's like the only thing that's the defense I can have for it. But I do kind of agree. I wish there was depth. I just don't know if it would have worked with this type of movie.
That's certainly a fair point too, especially with how tight the movie runs. I can definitely agree with you on the point of just if they tried to expound on some things, it might tip the balance askew, which would have made this movie feel completely different. So, yeah, I think that's something I can definitely come to an agreement on.
Let's get into the aesthetics of the movie. I gotta be honest, this movie looks ugly. Like, it does not look... It doesn't look good, but like you've mentioned, and it's a fair point to say, it was made on a very limited budget. Let me check the budget real quick on this. Like, this was made cheaply, and without it being like a Todd Haynes film that can get a good amount of money, I'm not surprised that it was as cheap looking as it was. It was made on a budget of $1.2 million. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, which means all the stars in this movie, including Cathy Moriarty, who is an Academy Award nominated actress, had to do this for cheap. Because there was just no way. And Michelle Williams was in it too. She was in Dawson's Creek at the time, so she had to command a little more money as well. Like, all these actors had to do this pretty cheap. For the amount of money this was made in, I understand why it looks the way it does. But even if it doesn't look visually appealing, I think it kind of works in this movie a little bit. Like, and that's the thing with camp too, to a certain extent. When it looks cheap, you still have to make it. You have to make something in it to be desirable to the eye or to the person who's watching it. Because a movie that's campy can look ugly as hell, but if it's entertaining and charming enough, it kind of offsets it or kind of fits with the mood. And the way the film is shot and looks definitely fits in this. So I will say the aesthetics, including the music, is not great, but I think it kind of adds.
To add to your point, the fact of the matter that the True Directions camp being colored in like garish, girly pink and baby boy blue didn't help matters either.
Yeah,
because just in the scenes that involve the set of True Directions is just, those are the two main prominent shades that just blow out everything else, and it's just like, oh god, this is not aesthetically good looking.
No, but like it also kind of fits because it just shows the ineptness of the group that's running this conversion camp, because they literally choose what I think are the two most primary colors when it came to gays and lesbians, which is bright pink and bright blue, which I'm like, that's pretty ridiculous, and especially with the way the clothes were that the campers were using were all like primary color light blue and like bright pink, and I just looked at it and went, oh my god. Really? Because again, it looks terrible, but it kind of fits, and I do like that in that. So that's why I want to say that the film does not look great, but I'm gonna defend it because it just fits with the rest of the movie. Why don't we get into our final thoughts? Zero, do you want to go ahead and give your rating?
I would probably give this maybe a 75%. It's not bad, but it's not a great movie either. The campy humor is good. The serious and sweet part at the end is just that. And it doesn't feel like it goes too heavy with the camp. That makes it feel like it's overstayed its welcome, which is great. They're definitely going to have to be points docked on just how ugly the film looks. And just, I think for me, just the garishness of the set design for the True Directions conversion camp. It was just, oh, my eyes are burning.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm probably going to echo your same rating. I'm giving it 3.5 stars out of 5. I could see this being a 4-star movie if I watch it again or if I think about it a little more. But I was pleasantly surprised by, not the humor, I was expecting the humor, and the really ridiculous phallic references throughout, or the cardboard cutouts in that movie. Oh god, I laughed my ass off when I saw a few of them. But like the hero with his gun and the guy. All right, I'm gonna stop. So the comedy was good, but I was not prepared for how sweet the movie was towards the end and how dramatic it was, and it actually fit very well. This could be a 4-star movie for me in the future, but I have to give it 3.5 for the same reasons you do. The look and the music of the movie just did not fit at all. And like, not that it didn't fit. I think it fit very well, but it just was not visually or orally pleasing in this. It just really was a struggle at times to be like, oh god, this looks so bad. This looks so terrible. But it kind of fit with the charm of the movie as well. I'm going to give 3.5 stars. I can see in the future probably giving it more, but this is a very good movie. And if you're looking for movies for Pride Month that are a little bit happier, I would say, and you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend But I'm a Cheerleader. This really surprised me, and I'm glad you liked it too. I enjoyed the film a great deal. So 3.5 stars for me, 75% for Zero. Okay, Zero. So for next week, we're going to play a little game. Next week coming up, you and Kim told me your favorite movies, and what's going to happen is I'm going to take the favorite movie that you said, and I'm going to have Kim watch it, and Kim told me her favorite movie, and you're going to watch it. But I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to give you some hints, and you're going to have to figure out what the film is. So I'm not going to make it too hard. I'm not going to make it too easy, but if you want to use Google to look it up, you can go right ahead. I will edit out the blank space in it, so don't worry about that. So, are you ready for your clues?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do it. Okay. Your first clue, Zero, is one of the principal actors was in all 3 of the original Spider-Man movies. Would you like to take a guess?
Tom Holland.
You don't have to. I'm not saying guess the actor. I'm saying guess the movie.
Well, I was gonna say it's kind of thin with that because I know if it's Tom Holland, then he's been in a lot of movies.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you it again. This principal actor was in all 3 of the original Spider-Man movies, the original trilogy.
Okay, I'm guessing Tobey Maguire.
Okay, so do you want the second hint?
Yeah.
The other principal actor can tell the tale of Captain Jack Sparrow.
Okay,
And do you want the third hint?
Yeah.
The filmmaker will say anything to be almost famous. The filmmaker will say anything to be almost famous. That's a big hint.
This is probably far from it. The Great Gatsby?
No. One more guess. Do you want one more hint?
Yeah.
Okay. The first hint, the principal actor's female.
Okay. I think I'm just dead stuck.
Okay. You give up?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to send the message to you now of the movie that we are watching for next week. In there right now, go ahead and say what it is.
The movie is 2005's Elizabethtown.
Yes, so we're watching the film starring Orlando Bloom and Kirsten Dunst, directed by Cameron Crowe. It's Elizabethtown. Cameron Crowe is a director I loved when I was younger. He did films like Jerry Maguire, and he did the amazing Almost Famous. He also wrote the film Say Anything. The filmmaker will say anything to be almost famous. That was the bad. He hasn't done a lot of great films since, but he still is a pretty damn good writer and director. And this is Kim's favorite movie of all time, Elizabethtown. I've told her so many times to see Almost Famous, but she won't do it. But there you go. So we are going to watch the film, which is Kim Shackman's favorite film, Elizabethtown, starring Orlando Bloom and Kirsten Dunst, directed by Cameron Crowe. Are you excited, Zero? You're about,
as usual. I usually come in with very low expectations, but we'll see what happens.
You're already doing the right thing so far. Okay, so on that note, this is the end of Capital Games Movie Club. Tune in next week, where me and Zero review Elizabethtown, starring Orlando Bloom, Kirsten Dunst, and Susan Sarandon, directed by Cameron Crowe. I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.